Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Sante, and I work for the Big East Conference, and we'll be emceeing today's Big East University session. This is the second session of the fall 2020 Big East University semester, and our focus this semester will be on the emerging space of name, image, and likeness, affectionately known as NIL. We're really excited about this semester's curriculum and hope these sessions can assist you in identifying, cultivating, and expanding your knowledge base in and around opportunities to profit from NIL. I'm particularly excited about the slate of speakers we have participating in today's sessions titled From Student Athlete to Entrepreneur. All of our speakers are former student athletes who have successfully transitioned into business owners and just yesterday were in your shoes. Our next speaker of the day is Chaz Bottoms, a former men's track and field student athlete at DePaul University and founder of CBA Studios. Chaz is director, animator, and writer originally from Cleveland, Ohio. Chaz received his BFA in animation from DePaul University and is currently living in Los Angeles, California. His work has appeared in Toon Boom, Afropunk, Vibe Magazine, I'm from Cleveland.com, and St. Heron. Chaz's short films include Hello, The Creator, Touche Toupee, and A Walk to School have premiered globally, winning multiple awards. His 2016 film Introvert was part of a season 6 of ABFF Independent and is currently airing on Aspire TV. His 2017 film All Kids Go to Hell premiered at the Cannes Short Film Corner, Cleveland International, on Toon Boom, Afropunk, and was featured in Art Gallery during summer 2018 in Taiwan. In 2018, Chaz co-directed The Indies, an animated short, a film that raised $50,000 on Kickstarter to produce and is currently airing on Revolt TV. Chaz has collaborated and produced content for Spring Hill Entertainment, Lil Nas X, Adult Swim, Steve Harvey Global, John Legend, Sesame Street, TBS, Sony Music, Columbia Records, Atlanta Records, Snapchat, and Foot Locker, to name a few. He's also worked on character design for Nickelodeon Animation. Chaz's next film, Batu, an animated musical, is coming in 2022. As you can see here, Chaz is much accomplished, and we're really excited to have him joining us on today's Big East University session. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Chaz to start his presentation.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction. Wow, man, it's crazy to always hear, like, when someone reads your bio out, it's like, wow, I guess I really have done all that. But thank you so much again. Super happy to be here. I'm about to share my screen and let's dive into this presentation. Hopefully, I can give some insight into my journey and just how I, kind of used being a student athlete to really kind of, I guess, gain some skills into starting my journey as an entrepreneur. So you see there some of my artwork and a picture of me running at Big East back in my track and field days. So again, yo, everybody. I'm a director, animator, writer, and also owner of CBA Studios, which is my boutique production company that's based out of Los Angeles. Again, I've done work for Lil Nas X, Nickelodeon Animation, John Legend, Steve Harvey, Bleacher Report, Sesame Street, and others. I'm currently working on a short film titled Batu, an animated musical, which is also being currently developed as a series with Cartoon Network. So a lot of exciting stuff. I'm somebody who, always kind of knew I wanted to work in film, TV, animation. I love telling stories. I love the visual medium, and I just think, it's such a powerful tool to bring groups together. Okay. So just a little background about my time as a student athlete at DePaul. I was a track and field sprinter from 2013 to 2017. I was the men's captain my last 2 years. And I ran the 400, the 200, the 4x4, 4x1, kind of a versatile sprinter. I was part of a Big East champion 4x4 relay in 2014 and 2016. Our team won the Big East championship indoor and outdoor 2017. We were the first and up to this point still only men's team to win a Big East championship, let alone back-to-back kind of in the indoor-outdoor. I was an all Big East academic runner, and then also holder of one of the DePaul 4x4 relays as a member. And then, like I said, I was an animation major and graduated magna cum laude. So just wanted to give a little bit of context as to kind of what I did as a student athlete. Loved track and field. I was super, super excited to run at DePaul. Definitely one of the highlights of not only, my time in college, but of my life. And I still keep in contact with a lot of folks from the university, obviously the Big East. And yeah, I think of my time very fondly at DePaul. So I kind of wanted to talk about, my experience when I was there and, with this new image and likeness rule, I think that there's a lot of opportunity for student athletes to benefit from that I didn't have when I was there. There was definitely talk about this rule coming into effect while I was a senior, I believe, but I knew that I wouldn't really be able to capitalize off of it. And so hopefully by the end of this presentation, I provide some resources and just some insight into what I would do, if I was in a current student athlete's shoes. So I worked when I was a student athlete. I had a couple on-campus jobs, but really I wanted to work in animation. I knew that that was what I wanted to do post-collegiately. So when I was a junior, I began freelancing as a way to, one, continue to work on my portfolio, but also build meaningful connections. And I think that's, really important. And I'll talk about it a lot throughout this presentation. It's just the importance of, meaningful, kind of thoughtful connections. So I was passionate about animation and it never really felt like work. So sometimes on long bus rides to meets, I would have my little tablet and I would be working on cartoons or drawing, just any free time that I had, which, student athletes, it's few and far between, just really making sure that I was maximizing my time. And, sometimes I had to make sacrifices, but I knew it would pay off. So as a senior, definitely freelancing, working on campus jobs, and also, still running and being a captain of the track and field team, like left very little time. So, time management really becomes key. And so what I was doing when I was freelancing is I was mainly working in music videos and like some small nonprofit animation work. So I would do everything from starting to think of the designs, like what do these characters look like? What do the backgrounds look like? What's the video's aesthetic gonna be? Really started to, start quarterbacking projects. And really at the time, I just thought that I was doing a continuation of what I was doing in school. It was no different than the animation classes at DePaul, where it's like, all right, this is a class where you're gonna learn how to design characters, how to animate characters, how to edit. I really just thought I was doing an extension of those classes. So maybe that's another reason why I didn't really feel like work. But again, it was something that I was passionate about and, something that I was actively thinking about, what does my life look like post collegiate sports? So I talk about that and kind of thinking about knowing where I kind of wanted to go working in animation. And a lot of like how I think about things is working backwards, like reverse engineering the process. And it's pretty similar to track and field. If you really think about it, animation is really important about, the timing of something is really important. Same with like running a certain time in track and field and, saying you want to hit a certain mark or a certain time, you then kind of have to create your workout plan retroactively to then say, all right, well, this is what we need to work on. And animation's a lot of the same way. Like I can visualize a fully colored piece of animation, knowing what I want it to look like. And then it's like, okay, how do I work backwards and where do I need to start so that I can get to that point in the most efficient way, with the least amount of headaches, working harder or working smarter, not harder. And so I'm going to just, talk about that a little bit with some examples, some never before seen animation from Batu, the short. So I'm excited to share. So I talked about storyboards, and in animation, a storyboard is basically just like the rough visual idea of like, hey, this is what's going on in the scene. Some timing, some poses. It can be very rough, as you see. Like these are, basically just scribbles to just kind of get the idea out and to showcase like, hey, this is what the characters are doing. Here's how it's kind of going to be timed out. But it's really the blueprint for that kind of final scene that I have in my mind. So in that shot, the characters are dancing. And the best thing about animation is that you kind of have to film reference of yourself doing stuff. That's the best way for you to understand what the body is doing. Similar with track exercises and just athletic exercises and lifting. I was a very visual type of person. So if I saw somebody do an exercise or a workout, it would become very easy for me to then do it because I understood what parts of the body were moving and how that influenced other parts of the body. And so here, filming these dancers really allowed for me to say, okay, this is what their feet are doing. And when their feet are doing this, their head's doing this, the hands are doing that. And then you really start to be able to break down the movement so that you can go in and actually draw this, because that's the next step, right? Is like, all right, now I got to take the storyboard and take this dance reference and create a character performance, basically, which then gives us this. So there's a ton of planning, that goes into breaking down those dance movements kind of frame by frame. And again, like this isn't like traced, like these characters, we had to actually go through and break down like, here are the poses, and then draw like what each one of those is and make sure that we're tracking things like the face and making sure they're looking at one another. And so, it gets really kind of involved the same way, a practice would, or, really just kind of looking at it from that lens of like, perfect practice makes perfect. And so, really just kind of taking our time step by step to make sure that the animation is hitting the way that it's supposed to. And so this feels pretty good to me. So I'm like, all right, bet, let's finalize that scene with color. Let's clean up the lines. And then you end up with kind of something like this. It might be a little choppy because there's a lot of GIFs going on right now, but you kind of get the idea of like, that final color image is what I initially saw in my head. Like I knew I wanted it to look like this bright, colorful dance shot, right? This animation. And so I knew I needed to start with the storyboard. I knew I needed to then film the reference and then do a rough pass. And then once I'm happy with each one of those passes, it's like moving on to the next step. You don't want to cut corners or cheat the process in any way, because then, you'll end up realizing something's missing at the very end, and then you have to go back in, and then it's kind of like, there's a way to do it step by step to where, you're maximizing each step of the process and understanding it. And so, that's kind of how I viewed track and field, running like a 400. There's race strategies. So it's like, okay, based off of my body type, the way I run, how do I go out and be competitive and, be a part of this team? And everyone on the team kind of had that same mentality of like, we all knew where we wanted to go and what we could do, but it's like then putting in the proper work kind of day by day to, build. Sometimes it takes a little long, but, if you're actively trying to, improve each day, then I feel like it's only a matter of time at that point before you reach, the goal that you want to reach. So today, like, man, like it's such a huge win for student athletes. Like I couldn't imagine what it was like. I remember, kind of the orientation at the beginning of each year for DePaul, and kind of like us going over NCAA rules, and for this to now basically you guys have the freedom to go out and do this. It's really awesome. I'm a little jealous for sure, but I definitely want to kind of propose some rhetorical questions, but just things to kind of think about. That if I were in your shoes, this is what I would be thinking about. So first one is, what is your brand, right? Like what do you want, how do you want to be perceived to not just your university and your teammates, but to kind of the larger sport? If you're a basketball player, like what does your brand as a all-encompassing hooper look like, right? What do you like to do? I think that's a huge thing. You definitely want to be passionate about whatever it is that you want to do, because then it feels less like work when deadlines approach, when things get tough. I think that's really important. And then, just kind of thinking about what does life look like kind of post-athletic career. I talked about that. And, really it wasn't until I went to an animation conference in Los Angeles when I was a senior, and it really kind of hit me that I was like, oh, in like 6 months, like, I might not be running track anymore. So like, what does that look like? It can be kind of hard to imagine in that moment, because you spend so much time around your teammates at the athletic center, practicing, lifting, taking care of yourself, that I feel like it can be a little easy to miss. So sometimes it's great to just take a step back and kind of be like, let me think about this big picture. Like, what do I want to be perceived as? What do I like to do? And how can I start to build upon, daily, so that once, my post-athletic career is here, I kind of have some semblance of what it is I want to do. And then lastly, what does your team look like? And I don't mean, your teammates, but I mean those people who are going to help you maximize this new rule. So, that could be an agent, that could be somebody in, the athletic center, that could be even a friend who is in, in business school, perhaps. Like I always think of the classic example of like LeBron James, and the kind of his team are all people who he grew up with, that he trusted, and, work it probably doesn't feel like work when they, hang out. Yeah, there's business, but, at the end of the day, there's kind of that camaraderie that can, again, just kind of help. When you're busy practicing, they can be responding to emails, or just filling you in on like what's going on with various things. So those are just some things to kind of think about. And yeah, this is a drawing I did earlier this year. So strategize. A lot of this, I think, to maximize it kind of is dependent on strategy. So again, just kind of some things that I would be thinking about if I was still a student athlete is, how do you reach out to brands for partnerships? And there's a few different ways to look at it. Like, is this a professional partnership? Like, is someone reaching out to you? Or are you like sliding in somebody's DMs? Is it a personal partnership? You have a friend who makes clothing, and you want to help them, you want to help each other, right? You get some dope pics in their hoodies, and they get, like, hey, look at this great student athlete, wearing our stuff. Or is this a referral connection? And, that's somebody saying, hey, I think you should talk to this person. There might be an opportunity here for you. And so there's various ways to go about reaching out to them. A lot of business does happen on Twitter and Instagram. But I think, it's always easiest to have like emails. And that's when having a team can be helpful, or just, again, the time management to say, all right, it's before I go to bed or first thing in the morning, I'm going to look at emails to see if, basically to keep things moving along so that you can actually execute, these brand partnerships. And then thinking about what that partnership looks like. Is it a social media campaign? Is it clothes? Is it for, a beverage? Is it, just kind of thinking about what that looks like and what it is that you are going to need to actually do. Are you going to need to take pictures? Are you going to need to, post something on social media. It helps everybody just, again, kind of get that big picture of, what this actually is going to look like. So that way, both parties are kind of in agreement of like, hey, this is what's going to happen. And then I think the biggest thing for me, and it took me a minute to find this out, especially being an entrepreneur, is knowing what it is that you bring to the table. I think that, it's such a powerful thing to know, like, this is what I'm good at and this is what I am bad at. So that way people won't ask you to do the stuff that you're bad at. I know that it's like, it seems really simple, but I know a lot of times as entrepreneurs, when people first start out in the business world, they want to do everything and say yes to everything. And, I think it's better to do a great job on maybe one or two things than, just kind of be like, that's okay. On a bunch of stuff. I think that your network is your net worth, and that's going to be a huge connection. So anytime you go out and do something, just being mindful of like, I want this to be a hit, basically. And again, it goes back to having your team and working and doing stuff that you're passionate about. Like, don't just do stuff to do stuff, or, for whatever reason, if it doesn't feel right, like, definitely go with your gut and, figure out what that partnership looks like, so that you're able to build off of it into the next partnership. And that's kind of the next point. And I talk about, do you need an agent? Do you need a lawyer? Start thinking about who that you could reach out to kind of help you along the way. Like, a lot of the work that I got as an entrepreneur really started to pick up once I had a team behind me, which was about 2 years ago. Getting a manager, getting an agent, getting an entertainment lawyer, it really just helps protect you. And I think that's something that is definitely worth, investing in, and figuring out, even if it's probably the least fun part of things, is like figuring out like, oh, okay, who are the, kind of the more business side aspects of things. But those are really going to be important relationships and connections that, are going to be important. And then again, this rule is new, so I'm not like, I haven't had an orientation session on it, but just, again, making sure you're properly following any of the NCAA or Big East guidelines. Again, it's just like crossing your T's and dotting your I's. And if you have an agent or a manager or a lawyer, they might be able to do this for you. Like, you don't even have to, they'll tell you what you can and can't do, because they would be the ones reading it. Not everyone has the time to, go through and make sure that they're doing everything. But it is important to be thorough, so that, everything you're doing is all copacetic with the Big East and NCAA. And then lastly, I would just say, keep being creative. Like, at the end of the day, like, sports, I think there is a lot of creativity within sports. I think about track and field and being creative with training programs, or ways to kind of trick yourself mentally into doing things that, like, I think about track and field as such a, you run in circles basically each week, in the hopes that you complete running in that circle faster each time you do it. And so, just finding like creative ways to kind of trick yourself into being like, all right, I can go do this. Or, with basketball players, like creative, layup packages, or dribble moves, or just, defensive schemes, and all that fun stuff. And a lot of the stuff I learned about when I was a student athlete, about time management, team building, just being responsible, like having, a lot of responsibilities on your plate, and being kind of locked in, and, striving for greatness. I carry a lot of those with me, still to this day. And, I think it's important. Those are important life skills that are really tough to get anywhere else. And so, if you're fortunate enough to be a student athlete in this position, like, definitely don't take it for granted. Those are life skills that will continue to serve you. And it'll just be a well of information and knowledge and experience that you'll always be able to go back and pull from, when times get tough as an entrepreneur. And again, just continue to try to push and make those meaningful connections. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. That's all part of the process. Everyone's still learning here. I've only been out of school for 4 years, and I still feel like a novice. Like, you read my bio, and it sounds like that I've had a nice accomplished career, but there are a lot of hard lessons learned, things that I had to improve upon, and just again, kind of that looking in the mirror that you sometimes have to do as a student athlete, and asking, what is it that I can improve upon? Where can I be better? And then, being honest about what it is you like to do and what you don't like to do. And yeah, I mean, hopefully y'all got something from this presentation, but I think now we're gonna open it up with some Q&A. But yeah, hopefully y'all enjoyed it.
Thanks, Chaz. I enjoyed it in hearing about your journey, and I think you had some cool artwork that you included in there. So thank you for sharing that as well. I guess to start off the questions, just to kind of give you some perspective here, we earlier in today's sessions, we kind of put our questions into different buckets, and I felt like the buckets were a cool way to kind of touch on certain areas and certain components of your journey. So I'm going to deliver the questions in a bit of a bucket type format. So I guess the first bucket of questions that I will have for you, it's kind of student athlete related, right? To Chaz as a student athlete. We always hear and share with our student athletes the value of transformational skills, particularly those soft skills, right? Time management, scheduling, resilience, things like that. But I think in your presentation, you mentioned some of the impacts of some of the hard skills or technical skills, if you will, and how you incorporate that into your programming. At what point did you see at what point in your journey did you realize there was a bridge between those technical skills of kind of creating those workouts that are specific to you in track and field, and applying that to your role as an artist and as a director?
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of it is kind of stems from it being kind of reiterative. Track and field, right? I said earlier, it's you're doing the same thing and you want to get better at doing that same thing. And it's the same with drawing. It's the same with I think a lot of creative stuff, music, acting, writing, especially animation. I mean, in the example you saw, I had to start with a storyboard and then redraw that same thing over and over again, basically until it looks like, until I'm happy with it. And so kind of similar with track and field, if I go out and I run a time and it's like, I know I'm better than that, or like, hey, I did really good. I'm still looking at to where I can improve though, right? Because you never kind of want to be like satisfied, because that's when the growing stops, right? Like I feel like you can always be better. You can always perform better. And same with art, like there's always room for improvement. And the way to improve is to, sometimes just take a step back, go back to the drawing board and say, okay, I attempted to draw this, or I attempted to run this specific time, and this is what actually ended up happening when I executed doing it. So what can I do to either get closer to that final goal, or if it just looking at yourself in the mirror and being honest. I think for me, I found that, I guess I always thought of it like kind of the two were intertwined. It actually wasn't until my visit at DePaul where my track coach on my visit, he was just like, animation and track, I don't see the connection there. And that was the first time in my mind where it occurred to me that other people might not see it like that. Right. And I was just like, oh, well, both are really important with like the timing aspect of it. There's a lot of like self-reiteration of it and growth, and you're always looking to improve, basically.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point that you brought up because that was actually kind of, I think you teased out a response to the next question that I have. And that was really saying, track and field is unique in a sense that you're competing against yourself most of the time, right? You're competing against the
Yeah.
clock and you're competing against a previous version of yourself. And I guess the question I would ask, and I think you kind of touched on it in some respects, but how have you taken that kind of mindset into the development of your projects, right? You're competing against yourself, you're trying to be a better version of yourself every time you step onto the track, or in this case, every time you create a new character or a storyline, you're trying to improve upon said storyline. So could you maybe talk about a little bit more about that and how that your participation as a student athlete kind of influenced that perspective as well?
Yeah, for sure. There's I feel like when you're a student athlete, everyone has their own kind of personal goals that they want to reach. With me specifically, it was like running a specific time or placing a certain place at Big East, scoring a certain amount of points at a meet. And sometimes you fall a little short. Sometimes you impress yourself and you run a personal record and you're like, wow, all that hard work. But no matter what, if you execute, no matter what the outcome is, if you're satisfied and you're like, all right, I'm done, wash my hands of it, like you'll stop growing. And then you might go out next week and, run a terrible time, a time that you might not have run since high school. And then at that point, it becomes a slippery slope, right? So you always want to, I think, have kind of that workers mentality, kind of that you can definitely flex if you want to, but just know that when Monday rolls around, it's back to the drawing. Like you have to get back into the trenches and grind. And same with animation. It's like if I want to be better at the end of each project than I was at the beginning, right? If I'm starting Batu, like I started writing Batu in 2018, and that I was a completely different artist. Like my mindset, everything was like, I still wanted to improve, but just where I was at skill wise. I knew I had a long way to go. So here I am now, 3 years later. And, now I know how to like pitch a show to Cartoon Network. I have like, an animation studio, like I do project management stuff, you know what I mean? And it's just like, what if I was, content with where I was 3 years ago, who knows what opportunities I might have missed out on. And so you always just want to be open to continuing to develop and grow. And, I think in terms of track and field, like you said, it is most of your times it's you against the clock or you against, yourself from last week or whenever you ran your PR. And, same with a project. Whenever you start a new project, you're kind of back to square one. And, you might, what works for a music video might not work for a short film, might not work for an episode of TV. And so there's always opportunities for you to further grow, further develop, and, further learn. And a lot of that also just kind of comes from who you're surrounding with, who you're, are surround, like who are, your coaches, even though I'm not an athlete anymore, I still have people who I would consider coaches who like I know I can go to if I have questions, people who I know I can go to for help. There are people who are older than me, people who are the same age as me, even people who are younger than me. You know what I mean? So it's just like not always just being open to learning more and to improving.
That's sage wisdom, that the fact that it doesn't matter who delivers the message if the message rings well, right? So I love that perspective that you're bringing with that, and your willingness to learn and open yourself up to a variety of different people with the ultimate goal of improving upon yourself and your craft. So I love to hear that. I think that that's a good nugget for our student athletes to take away from today. The next bucket we're going to go into is Chaz the student, right? So we talk to our student athletes all the time. About the resources that they have available on campus that are at little to no cost, right? So I would ask you, what are areas or relationships that prospective entrepreneurs should be developing while they're on campus?
Yeah, there's a few. Wow. I think the easiest thing is connecting with your classmates. I think that's such a huge. I know sometimes it can be hard, and it was hard for me. Because like a lot of the times I would be running to go like before class, I'd be coming in from practice, or I'm running to go lift after class. So like sometimes I didn't have the ability to hang out after class with my classmates, and so I really had to strive to make relationships with folks. One of the animators who I work with, he's incredible. His name's Malik Bolton. Me and him were in the same orientation group at DePaul back in 2013, and here we are 8 years later working together. And I think that's such a important aspect that I don't think I hope a lot of people who are student athletes do try to utilize is your classmates, because everyone's going to graduate at some point, and definitely want to use those relationships in the professional space, having had that previous relationship knowledge of one another. I think that's really huge. Another resource is, I would say, any extracurricular like information, stuff related to your major is always going to be huge. So DePaul would have people from like DreamWorks and Nickelodeon come give presentations, and if I was able to go, I would always go. And that was just a chance to hear about studio life, how to get a job at like a studio like that. Just again, information that you might not be able to find online or in the classroom, but just hearing it kind of from the people's mouth. They would get flown out from LA to Chicago and give these awesome talks. And I feel like that was, man, just so instrumental, because it became less of a untangible, it became more tangible, basically kind of seeing that information in real time. And then it's kind of like the first thing I said, but really utilizing your professors. That was something that I started doing when I was a junior, and really did when I was a senior, and I wish I would have done it sooner. But again, just a lot of the professors at DePaul had worked and are still actively working in the animation industry. And so they had a lot of technical knowledge, but also just a lot of like, hey, this is how your career is probably going to be when it starts out. So this is the stuff you want to start working on, portfolio pieces. This is what they look for. You want to be a character designer. All right, well, this is what you'll need in your portfolio. So again, just utilizing those resources, because they're right there, like you see them every day. And now I still talk to professors from DePaul, but it's via email, and sometimes I miss how easy it was to just go into their office or schedule office time or talk to them after class really quickly. Whether it was schoolwork or whether it was just a general question about the art form. I think that those are three, hopefully really helpful things. Again, just being involved in the kind of student community aspect of it as well, I think is always going to be something that you'll be able to use post school.
That's really good perspective to have. I think that you touched on a couple of things that are pretty interesting. I think you're reiterating the importance of networking in your time at DePaul, or at your time in college, wherever you're enrolled at, and the importance of not just networking up, but networking laterally as well, and how much benefit that provides. And I also wanted to give you a quick shout out to the fact that you used to sit in on presentations from Nickelodeon and DreamWorks, and now you're giving presentations. So you're kind of fulfilling that opportunity that was afforded to you. So I wanted to give you a shout out there as well.
You always got to pay it forward. I think too that's probably something I should have added in the presentation, but I think it's also important to have a personal mission with the work that you want to do with your brand, right? Like you want to, I think, always just make sure you're paying it forward and making it easier for the next generation to do whatever it is that they want to go out and do.
Sure. So the next question I have under the Chaz as the student bucket, outside of animation and some of those fine art specific courses that you took, what do you feel like was a course that you benefited most from, and that you apply in your journey today?
Let me see. It was probably my capstone course at DePaul, which is our senior year. Everybody, we're on quarters, so there's 3 quarters in the school year. 2 of those quarters you spend in capstone, and that's where you make your senior thesis film. And mine at the time was All Kids Go to Hell, which is the one that ended up screening at the Cannes Short Film Corner. And that was one of the more ambitious projects to probably come out of the capstone. It was 7.5 minutes long, and most capstones are like 2 to 3 minutes. So I went above and beyond, but it was the perfect like project to really test my time management and production skills. DePaul has this long winter break, right? Like our first quarter ends the week before Thanksgiving, and then we don't go back until January. And so my capstone was the fall and then that winter. And instead of taking the 6 weeks off, I worked on my capstone pretty much consistently. We were on campus for track for a few of those weeks. And, when I wasn't hanging out with my teammates or practicing or lifting, I was working on my capstone. And that kind of just taught me how to, manage still having that social life, having work, but then also having your craft. And I believe I was probably still freelancing on some stuff too at the time. So I still had a little bit of work as well. But that was kind of the first, I would say, like test of like, hey, the skills that you're kind of learning as a student athlete, as a track and field runner, as a captain, like, can you successfully execute that over the course of a project when, you're still competing, you're still practicing, you have other jobs, other obligations, and you still want to have a little bit of a social life. I think that was just a great class that like, kind of all helped me encompass that experience.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that and the importance of developing some of those life skills that are not necessarily learned but experienced skills, if you will. So that's a really good point that you make there. Okay, so we're going to transition into now Chaz, the business owner, and you talked about freelancing and how important that was in terms of the overall development of your portfolio. How important is it for creatives like yourself to freelance and kind of get experience outside of the classroom in helping develop their portfolio?
Yeah, I think, it's almost like that real world, kind of what I just alluded to, that real world experience. I think what's great about classes and professors is that you kind of have the ability to take it slow and ask questions, and you're slowly just kind of learning how to build. But the moment you jump onto an actual job and you're getting paid to do it, you kind of have to run with it, like, and really just kind of trust your gut on a lot of things. And so for me, it was really just about, again, just how do I manage kind of everything that I'm currently doing, but also just kind of maximizing my time.
Writers often get writer's block. Is that something that happens to you? And if so, kind of what do you do to reset and kind of refocus your approach to whatever project it is?
Yeah, there are definitely some days where it does feel like a job, even though I love what I do. There are some days where deadlines are ticking, or, there's a creative issue that it's hard to crack. And sometimes, what I have to do is just kind of step away from the project and take a walk or go like for a run, or listen to music, turning on a movie that I love. I think when you do kind of have those moments of like, I don't know what to do next, I think sometimes the best thing to do is just step away for a bit. I live in Los Angeles, so I can go on a hike, I can go drive down the coast and really just like clear my mind. And sometimes a lot of those, my best ideas do come from when I'm doing something else and I'm not actively working. It's when I'm like eating dinner or cooking dinner or like cleaning up or doing laundry. It's like, oh, that's the creative solution. So I think, sometimes it is important to prioritize breaks. I know I've talked a lot about having that kind of hustler's mentality, but I think too, another huge important thing is making sure you're taking care of yourself, like mentally and physically. My senior year at DePaul, I actually gave a kind of internal athletics department, kind of mental health talk, because everyone was like, Chaz, you do so much and you always are in a good disposition. Like, how do you balance it all? And so I think a lot of it too is just scheduling that time for yourself to go play, go watch a movie, go hang out with some friends, go do something that is not work, because you don't want to be running on fumes and eventually burn out. Like, I think those things are always important. So those are some of the things I do. But it can be other hobbies, making music, writing, whatever that looks like to you.
Well, that's great, being able to prioritize self-care. And that's something that we continue to talk about today, is the importance of mental health and kind of making sure that you're taking care of yourself first, and then allowing all these other things to kind of fall in place. So I appreciate you sharing that, and even sharing some anecdotal stories about things that you've done to assist yourself in kind of stepping away and creating some space for self-care. You also touched in your presentation on the value of teams in a variety of capacities. I feel like one was in terms of helping you reach your goal, and then in terms of assisting you from a business perspective. When you're looking to add to your team, what type of things are you taking into consideration when you're considering potential additions?
Yeah, for sure. I'll speak on it from kind of like me as a director, studio kind of owner. I'm an animator by trade, so I kind of like to approach, the leadership positions, the manager positions, director positions from like that place, and kind of knowing what it's like to be on the other side. It's not really the other side, same side, but you know what I mean. And so I like people who are kind of self-motivated. They don't necessarily need to be micromanaged. They're able to really, again, utilize their time wisely and communicate, when they're confused about something, or if they have a question about something, or if they need more time on something. I think that's a big thing I look for. Definitely communication. So, I've been a remote studio since 2019 when we opened. And so, it was going through the pandemic, when everything else went remote. I feel like it kind of, I was like, oh, I'm happy. I already kind of know what it is I need from this to be successful. And, a lot of it does rely on that communication. And so, if I send somebody an email, in a perfect world, they respond to it within 24 to 48 hours, and weeks don't go on and on where I don't hear from them, and radio silence. And again, I'm talking through more like lived experience at this point, where, some people I've worked with, and, they didn't quite have it all together yet, whether it was inexperience, age, or they had life stuff going on. I never hold that against them. We live in a crazy and chaotic world, and so sometimes stuff does happen. But all I ask is that you're able to communicate. When if you miss something, or the moment you might not be able to turn something in, or you need help. That way, we're able to actually bring help. That's the beautiful thing about having a studio is, if there's an animator who needs some assistance, we have a roster of artists who can then kind of come on and help, get whatever it is that needs to get done. And again, I feel like just again having that big picture mindset, like, understanding how you kind of fit into the creative process, the puzzle piece, if you will. I think that's really huge. Also, just from kind of that perspective of, knowing that, all right, if I give you a scene, I kind of understand the assignment, and you're able to go out and do a really good job. And, obviously, lastly, I think portfolio is a huge thing. Like, you want to be able to show not just, friends, family, colleagues, but employers, kind of what it is you like to do and what you can do. And if there's anything that's not in your portfolio that you want to do, being able to communicate that. Like, I know a lot of people who are animators who also want to become directors or writers, but sometimes they're like afraid to say that. And it's like, well, if you never say it, how is someone, gonna know and hopefully try to give you that opportunity or help you, figure that out. So, again, I think it all just goes back to being authentic and being able to look at yourself in the mirror and say, I want to be professional. I want to be, you know, would I want to work with me? Basically, it's always kind of the thing I look at is like, would I want to rehire myself, or would I recommend myself to somebody else who might be looking for an animator? And really just again, a lot of that comes with follow through, communication, but I think at the end of the day, a lot of it is really dependent on the portfolio and being able to show people like this is what I want to do, and here are some examples of me doing that.
No, that's a really good point that you bring up, and that's kind of a common theme that we've heard today is the importance of communication. And again, when you think about entrepreneurs, right, it's not innate that you're thinking about that from a team perspective or from a communicative perspective, right? You're thinking about an entrepreneur works for themselves, therefore they're beholden to themselves. But there's a variety of different elements and external factors at play that assist you all in becoming successful, right? So I totally hear your ability to communicate, how important your ability to communicate with others is in the continued development and evolution of whatever business that you choose to go into. So thank you for sharing that bit. I got one more question for you, and I think it's kind of the elephant in the room. I think you touched on it briefly in your last response to the question, but obviously the pandemic has changed the makeup of the world, right, if you will. So yeah. How did you, as a business owner, kind of pivot in this different environment, virtual space, this pandemic-driven environment, and how did that impact CBA Studios, and what did you do to kind of adjust or modify your approach to the environment?
Yeah, for sure. Wow, I mean, little loaded, but I'm gonna start from the beginning. So like I said, we were kind of already remote, like for a year and some change before the pandemic hit. And it's so interesting because animation's always kind of been remotely produced-ish, like to a certain extent. Like we were one of the few industries that had like an uptick because of the pandemic, because a lot of the stuff that was live action either pivoted to animation or, stuff that got postponed being on set. A lot of stuff that was animated got greenlit, a lot of music videos, a lot of TV shows, commercials, ads. So it became like it was so interesting. That first year was like, all right, we're figuring it out. And then the pandemic hit, and then we got kind of slammed with a lot of projects. Like a lot of that stuff from my bio is literally from like late 2019 to end of 2020. And so it was kind of like what I alluded to with the capstone story earlier about like, all right, we had our year of training. Now let's really go out and do it. And, it really taught me the importance of investing in your team, in your roster, the artists who you work with, like really inspiring and empowering them to bring their best to the table each day. And, it can definitely be a little tricky with communication because as the projects got bigger, we still needed to figure out ways to, like, all right, I'm working with this animator or designer in, South Africa, and they're, however many hours ahead of me, or, how do we manage the deliverables, but also then like being able to meet and make sure that we're like maximizing it. If it's like 11 p.m. here, but 2 p.m. there, like how do we best like figure that out? And so there's a little bit of trial and error, but I feel like a lot of it too is just like, again, same way with athletics, like you have your team, you have your chemistry, you have those moments where everybody needs to kind of lock in. And I think with the pandemic was definitely one of those moments for me personally, where I experienced the amazing artists who I work with. All of us realizes that we kind of needed to step our game up and kind of all look for ways where we could improve. And that definitely took some time to figure out, but I think at the end of the day, it was really just like, at the end of the day, it's about the people, who are making, the animation, the telling the stories, the people behind, the scenes that's really the important part. And I think like the pandemic just really showed hopefully everybody that it's like, yo, like we got to be better to one another and nicer and like more, see the humanity in one another more so than just a deadline or just like another, a number or, production cog in the pipeline, right? Like everybody has family, everybody has a life. And so, really finding a ways to communicate like the importance of that balance. Because, a lot of people did, kind of had to recalibrate where they were at in life. And so definitely being mindful of that. And, like I said, for us, a lot of it was just, I'm thankful we had that, that year beforehand of really kind of figuring that out. And because, that allowed for us in 2020 to really hit the ground running and continue onwards this year.